Yo, welcome back to another video. Now in today's video, we'll be going over the comprehensive guides that I have made for Attack on Titan's extreme stage of the 7.0 update. Now this guide is not really going to be the guide that will help you get to beat the stage, but hopefully you can take some things away that would eventually help you beat the stage. You can definitely mix and match things from what I am using. This is not the be all end all guide for the stage because I'm not really going to be giving options on units you can use. I might say some stuff, but most of the things, it's like all the units are pretty much locked to what I am using. This is what this guide's going to be. So yeah, let's get straight into the first thing that we will be talking about, and that is going over all of the units that I use in this guide. So if you didn't know, there is a stage boost for the extreme stage that all of the AoT units have a stage buff. So with knowing that, let's get straight into talking about the teams. I will be using 3 different versions of this team, going over all of them. These are essentially the progression of the update and how you'd use each unit or like team as you progress through getting all of the units from this current update. So we have the Mythic team, and then we have the post Eren team, and then we have the post Ymir team. Essentially, to be clear, these are not the only units that you can use to beat these stages, but this team is what I found to be the easiest to use if you really do not have any good units with any good traits. So for the first team, we used all 4 gem banner units. We used the Ackermans, Zeke, Reiner, and Armin with 2 farms. I ended up using all of my units were Traitless outside of my 2 farm units having fortune on them, and we have 0 familiars equipped. Reason being that this is a baseline that people can follow. It is possible to do with this exact setup, but you do have options to make these units stronger than what I am using. Example, rolling traits on your units and also using familiars, which I will get into later. So for this team comp, as a quick rundown, Ackermans is the main damage dealer of the team with the assistance of the Nuclear Titan active from Armin. Then we have Zeke. He is used as a pure support for his 60% damage buff that he provides for 2 minutes when he's placed. And then we use Reiner. He's a really good unit in this stage, especially due to his free placement every 3 units placed and his placement damage being very high from the stage buff itself. Apart from Armin, due to him not needing stats at all my units I use in the team are fully ascended, minimum Z plus stats, and are level 60. Moving on to the next version, the post Eren team, we are simply replacing Reiner with Eren, and for this team comp, the differences are that Eren becomes the main damage dealer and the Ackermans are the sub damage dealer, and we don't use Armin's active at this point. In our last version of the teams, post Ymir team, the differences here are that Armin just simply gets replaced by Ymir. Traits are the next thing that we are going to be talking about. Pretty much since I did this guide Traitless, the minimum you would want is fortune on both farms. From there, any trait is pretty much beneficial outside of the obvious scholar trait. Monarch is not needed at all because all of our damage dealers that we are using, we are utilizing all of their placements. Fortune on units can be helpful because of cheaper upgrade costs. This is mainly for either Eren and also Ackermans because those are the 2 units that we mainly focus on upgrading. If you are looking to roll traits on your units, Armin can also do with fortune but isn't really required. And then pretty much any sort of trait going from like Blitz, Solar, Deadeye, Ethereal, even like Vigor 3 is good enough for the units themselves. We just want a little bit extra damage basically. And then lastly, range would be good for the Ackermans, just specifically for Kenny alone. This just allows him to be able to have a larger range to target the bosses for a longer time, so he can always apply bleed. Moving on to the familiars that I would recommend for your units. The first thing is familiars for your main damage dealers, that being Ackermans and Eren. For this, we have 3 options. All we are looking for is damage. Our first familiar option is a lot of visits, which cannot be obtained anymore. This provides 10% damage, minus 5% SPA, 10% range, and up to 5% elemental damage. Next familiar is Burb, which is obtained from the Sid raid. Ignoring the crit chance and crit rate, this provides up to 20% damage and 20% range, and also 5% elemental damage in what it can roll. And our last option for a familiar is Cat, which is obtained from the current spring event's chest and will be unobtainable once that event leaves. At base, this provides up to 7% damage, 3.5% range, and up to 5% elemental damage, which is not bad on its own, but through corruption force can get up to 50% elemental damage. But realistically, from corrupting it, you would be around 20 to 30% elemental damage. Any of these 3 familiars are good options, and I would go with whatever one that you do own that gives you the highest damage boost to your units. Moving on to Reiner, he is simply the same as the previous. Any sort of extra damage you get on him is very beneficial, so if you have any additional familiars that you aren't using for the Ackermans or Eren, I would use it on Reiner. Zeke, I would actually recommend the Roger familiar. This familiar can be obtained from Shining Castle's Legend Stage Act 3 or 4 and provides up to 50% permanently reduced regen or up to 75% with a good corruption 3. This just provides extra support for the bosses that walk too far out of Kenny's attack range and start regenerating health again. With reduced percentage regen, this should help Levi or Eren finish off bosses. For Armin/Ymir, I would recommend using the Fu familiar. This familiar can be obtained from the Rift Shard shop and provides up to 10% additional damage buff on top of buffs, or up to 15% with a good corruption 3. As it reads, this familiar gives an additional small damage buff on top of buffs that units give, so a 9% Fu on Armin would make Armin give a 29% damage buff to units. Last thing to note with this familiar in particular is that you cannot stack Fu buffs, only one works on the team. Alright, next thing is that we're going to be going over all the stage bosses that spawn. So the first boss is the Attack Giant. This boss spawns at wave 5 and has 900,000 HP with 2% regen. This is 18,000 HP per second. Once the Attack Giant reaches 50% HP for the first time, it gains 10 armored stacks. Each armored stack provides a 12.5% damage reduction. So at 10 stacks, the Attack Giant has a 125% damage reduction. An armored stack gets removed for each individually placed unit that hits the armored enemy, and after 10 seconds of the armored enemy not getting hit, it will restore all armored stacks. As an example, 3 Ackermans and 1 Zeke hitting the boss would remove up to 4 armored stacks, and 3 Ackermans, 1 Zeke and 4 Reiners hitting the boss would remove up to 8 armored stacks. This boss can provide a lot of challenge for the stage if you are struggling with this boss. Specifically, I would recommend using the Gone Familiar on the Ackermans. This familiar provides up to a 50% ignore damage reduction or a 75% with a good corruption 3, but there is a slight downside. This familiar is only useful for this boss in this stage, but isn't really needed if you are able to reduce its armored stacks through unit placement. Plus, you also would lose out on a damage familiar for the Ackermans. The second boss is 3 Nuclear Giants. These bosses spawn at wave 10 and have 4.26 million HP with a 2% regen. This is at 85,000 HP per second. On spawn, Nuclear Giants have 4 armored stacks, which shouldn't provide too much of an issue, as at this point you should have all the Ackermans placed and either a Zeke or Eren depending on your team. The other mechanic this boss has is it has the Blinded Mutator. This makes units that hit the blinded enemy reduce their range per hit by 5% up to 50% reduction. And the last boss is the Hammer Giant and the Giant Crystal. This boss spawns at wave 15 and has 4.28 million HP. The Hammer Giant is immune to all damage and spawns a giant crystal anywhere on the track that has equal HP to the Hammer Giant. The Hammer Giant will periodically stun the closest unit to the giant crystal, and once the giant crystal gets destroyed, the Hammer Giant will also get killed. Going over the modifiers that I would recommend, we have the Immunity modifier and the Champions modifier. For Immunity, this is less RNG reliant due to not having random bosses spawn, but the downside is that you cannot apply slow. Bleed will still be applied with the Immunity modifier. I would recommend this if you have a good extra damage coming from familiars and traits. For Champion, most bosses should be fine to deal with the exception of the Hammer Giant. This boss can spawn early from the Champion's modifier, and if the giant crystal is not already in range of your units, I would most likely restart. The best bosses to get for the Champion's modifier are Kenny, Nuclear Giant, and Giant Ape. They're just the easiest to deal with. And the next bosses that can be tougher are Levi and the Attack Giant. Levi just has 30 shields, which can be annoying early on, especially on wave 5, and the Attack Giant is specifically when it spawns with the normal stage Attack Giant. For some reason, I believe this is unintentional, but if the Champion's boss Attack Giant spawns with the normal Attack Giant, when you get the normal stage Attack Giant low enough, it will spawn a 1.28 million HP Eren boss, which you should also be able to deal with this boss relatively easily, but in some instances I actually have lost to this boss. Now the last thing that we will be going over is talking about the paths that the stage has. So I have both of of the areas of the stage where enemies split up, and I have colored them and then also put a number to make it a lot easier to understand what I'm talking about. So this is pretty much the RNG based part of the stage. It's very annoying, but it will definitely be a reason for losing a lot of runs because of bad boss pathing. So for the first boss, the attack giant, the best path route is green purple or 1-4, with the rest of the paths on the screen going from best to worst. For the nuclear giants, the best path route is the exact same as the attack giant, but for them you either want them to all three be on the same path at all times, so them going along the green path or one path, all three of them, or same with them going along red. For them it doesn't matter too much because it is later into the stage. Or the other thing is you want a 2-1 split with the two bosses that are together being on the longer path essentially. From here it can be very RNG with the second fork on the nuclear giants, because if they start going all in different directions, Kenny would stop hitting all of them and they will start to regenerate. For the hammer giant, you want them to take the longest possible path. It gives them the most amount of time before they reach the base, and that path is green, orange, or 1-5. All of the rest of the paths are on screen going from best to worst. Last note that I want to mention before we get into the stage showcases is that this is a very RNG based stage. There are going to be harder stages due to specific champion bosses spawning, where the crystal spawns at the end, and also which paths the boss takes. So with that being said, let's get into the first team showcase. And with that, that should be the Mythic team completed. Now on to the Eren team. Now with that, we have the Eren team done. It is a lot easier than the Mythic team, of course. Now, like I was typing up, I do recommend trying to see if you can overlap the lanes with like the Eren nuke, trying to get some extra damage on the nuclear giants. I don't think it's really needed, but it's just a quick fail safe essentially, just in case, you know, something does happen. But yeah, with that being said, that is the Eren team done. And with that, all of the teams are now done. So this is pretty much going to be the end of the video. I don't really have anything else to continue or say. So I appreciate it if you have watched this far through the video. See ya.